I think a special part of my story is the Lord gracing me to endure my mother's her issues with addiction and child abuse and neglect that she suffered with. My mother, I'm her only child, and when she had me at the time, she had a drug addiction, and she just wasn't able to care for me. And from what I was told, I took sick and had to be hospitalized, and she did not come back. And my grandmother came and she took me and became my legal guardian. And my grandmother, and she's also deceased, is the one who raised my mom. And she was abusive to my mom. My mother had a very hard childhood. So even just the fact that she would allow my grandmother to take me is, something I've always wondered. I would see her come around. I always called her by her first name. I never knew my father. His name isn't even on my birth certificate. But when she came around, usually she would be high when she came around. I was always told bad things about her. Sometimes she would come to the door and my grandmother would let her knock and not even open it. Sometimes she would come to the door, and if I had company, I would be embarrassed and I would go and hide. But I did know her, but I did not have a relationship with her. The only memories I have pretty much are things that I've been told other than seeing her come and go. Being raised by my grandmother, she took care of the house physically. She never worked. And my grandmother's from the South, and my grandmother's grandmother was a slave, actually. She wasn't nurturing in the sense that I could talk to her, meaning about personal things. If I was feeling sad or anything like that. After my biological mother died, I don't remember ever having a heart-to-heart conversation with my grandmother about how I felt. But I know my grandmother loved me. She did the best she could, but she had her own mental health issues. She had buried a few of her own children, neglected several of her children. So it wasn't the easiest thing, but she did right by me. I don't remember ever talking to anybody about how I felt. I wrote poems. I don't even really remember writing poems about it. I remember talking to myself, but I don't remember talking to anybody. As a kid, I was never in counseling or anything. African American families back then, that just wasn't something that you did, I don't remember talking to anybody about it, about how I felt or anything. I was afraid that what was going on would affect my life. I started having my own issues with drugs when I was at Grand Valley. I had already started drinking before in high school. And at the time, I was still carrying a lot of resentment towards my mom, and I hated her because I thought, she abandoned me and then she died. And I did. And I was becoming her, even though I said I never wanted to be like her, but I saw myself becoming her and not knowing what to do to prevent that from happening. I did ask God on several occasions why. Why did I have to go through these things? Why did my mother go through these things? And her siblings, because 3 of my mother and 2 of her siblings died. All of my grandfather's kids, they all died young. I know now, of course, that God was watching over me and just really covering me and leading me in the right direction. My mother didn't even graduate from high school, and the Lord has blessed me this year. I finished and graduated with my Ph.D. I believe the Lord put me around the people that I needed to be around so that I could be that pioneer in my family. I just really believe it was His grace. I mean, there is no way that I should be where I am today in my right mind with the mental health and substance abuse and different things that I've struggled with. I just believe it was God's grace and that He wanted to vindicate my mother. He allowed me to be blessed so that I can be a blessing to hurting families and other hurting adolescents. And I believe it just was the gift and the grace of God, just because he decided that I should be able to go through. If I had an opportunity to share with a parent dealing with substance abuse, or a child that is dealing with rejection and having to live with that, or living in another place other than their parents, I would first tell the child that God loves them. I would make sure that they know that, even though they may not understand it. And I would just encourage them to never give up. I would let them know that their identity comes from God and not necessarily the things that they see in their environment. And I would let them know that they have more control than they think, that even sometimes they may feel powerless, that they can make decisions that will take them further than the things that they see in their environment. And that God has made us as human beings resilient. He has made us to be able to endure hardship. And so I would just encourage them to not give up, because one day it will work for them, and that sometimes what you're called to pin down is what you have to wrestle against. And what I would tell the parent is just that it's never too late, and that even in their struggle and in their suffering, because it's not easy and quick to get out of addiction, but that even in their struggle and their suffering, to make sure that they let their child know that they love them, and make sure that their child understands that they did not do anything to cause it. And so that the child is secure, and the parent won't have to live with that regret of, I've been this terrible parent and my child doesn't know that I love them,